Hey there, amazing hosts. It's Kate, and I am so happy to be able to welcome you to our 2020-2021 host training. We obviously wish that this could look very different and that we could all be sitting together enjoying the company, but it's not a reality right now, and keeping you safe is a main priority for us. I want to thank you for just your grit, your ability to stay so closely connected to us through obviously such unprecedented times in our nation. I hope that you enjoyed the journey last year of watching how David's Refuge transformed the ways in which we came alongside caregivers, knowing that nothing could stop us from working towards our vision to continue empowering caregivers to lead their families with strength and grace. If anything, the caregivers we served needed us more this year and last year than they ever had before. And so we are going to rise up to that challenge. In the coming year, I truly wish that I could paint a beautiful picture of exactly what was going to unfold. But obviously, none of us can do that. So what I'm asking you to do is to remain confident in the David's Refuge team and know that our decisions and our new services and our structure and what we've had to do has been well thought out and brought to not just our staff, but our board of directors, and really hashed out to ensure that we're staying in line with knowing that we are always working towards the same vision and mission that we've always been here for, which is to provide resources, respite, and support to caregivers and their entire families, and to lead this cause towards empowering caregivers to ultimately lead their families with strength and grace, and obviously to always be reminded that they are not alone, that what they do matters, and God in this community loves them. You're about to embark on a training journey with us, none like any time we've ever done before, where you're going to hear from our amazing fellow host, Randy Downs, who has taken some time to really help us start the thought processes flowing. You're also going to hear from a friend of ours, Arel Moody, who did this training for our National Caregiver Awareness Month. In it, he talks about being in the David's Refuge bunker. And I just am so proud to know and honored to know that all of you are in that bunker with us. Last but not least, Morgan is going to finish up the training with a real list of how the host role, this host mentor role, is going to look for this year. Following the training, we're asking you to keep really great notes and sign up for one of the small group sessions where Morgan and I will work with all of you to hopefully answer all of your questions. I know nothing can stop this amazing team of beautiful volunteers from working to empower these families. No pandemic, no turmoil in our country will ever slow us down because we know why we are here. And we know that nothing can hold us back. Even if we can't be together physically with these caregivers, please know that every touch you give, in every way you know how, is going to impact these lives and transform these families. Can't wait to serve families with you in 2021 and well beyond. Thank you so much, and much love to all of you.
Hey everybody, this is Randy Downs, one of your fellow hosts, and I've been asked by Kate and Morgan to offer a moment of reflection and visioning as we look forward to this next year of hosting and how we support our guests throughout the year. So ultimately, the result of this brief time together will be a list of the hosting moves that we all can make in order to support our guests in every way imaginable. And it's really important for all of us to realize that we do all have gifts, and there's a reason we're hosting for David's Refuge, and it's a beautiful place for us to share the gifts with our guests throughout the year. So let's take a breath in a moment before our brains start working. And I want you to think about the word joy. And I want you to think about what brings you joy. Throughout this slide deck, this recording, I will be offering brief activities where you'll be thinking, where you will be writing, and I will pause very briefly, but I really encourage you to pause the recording so that you can have time to jot things down without feeling rushed. I will not be offended. I will not know when you are pausing the recording. So feel free to pause the recording when you're responding to some of these prompts. And so let's practice right now. We're going to ground ourselves with this idea of what brings us joy. So take a moment to think about what brings you joy and jot it down in the organizer that Morgan provided. So some housekeeping for our time together. You'll notice I mentioned the organizer that Morgan provided. So we wanted to have a space for you to write down your thinking. It's perfectly private. You don't need to share everything unless you want to there. And it's really a process to get you toward a final list that the team will use as we move forward with ways that we can host our guests and have the biggest impact on them throughout the years. So I'm going to ask you to reach back into your brain again and think about a value that you learned from your family, a value that helps you get through the day. Is it perseverance? Is it trust? Is it joy? What is a value that you've learned throughout your life that helps you get through the day? And when I say family, this could be your origin family, it could be your work family, or it could be your chosen family. So take a moment and jot down a value which helps you get through the day. I'm assuming you paused and now we're back together. And I want you to now try to reach into the brains, into the minds of the guests that you have hosted over the years, and think of someone that you have hosted. And if you were to guess based on your interaction with this guest, what might be their value words? And also jot down why. So if you jotted down that their value word is family or togetherness, how did you come to get that? Was it a conversation with them? Was it morning coffee? Was it a phone call? And what made you believe that if you were to guess that would be their value word? So jot down your guess value words based on your evidence of time together, and then jot down why you came to that conclusion. Again, pause if you're not ready to go on. So this one's going to take a little bit longer. And so I do encourage you to pause the recording. And I want you to really think about why you host. Why do you do it? Why do you host for David's Refuge? Just brainstorm the longest list that you can. Go ahead. Welcome back. And we're going to add on. We're going to go a little deeper now. What do you hope to get from hosting? It's not a selfish question. It's an honest question. What do you hope to get from hosting? Take a moment to jot down your hopes. And we're moving towards your guests. What do you hope that our guests get from being hosted? What would you wish for them to get from the experience of being a David's Refuge family? And so there's a reason that I asked you to reflect on the why of hosting and the hopes and the dreams. Because if that's why you do it and that's what you value, what are some possible hosting moves or activities that you can do or strategies that you can use when hosting that will help you reach the why? And ultimately, what are the hosting moves that will help your guests live their value word or reach towards their value word? And so this is the list that will go public. And Kate and Morgan are going to have small virtual meetings with everyone and compile this list of hosting moves that we can make as we think about all of the ways that David's Refuge supports families. Remember, it's not just the weekend. It's the phone calls. It's the events, virtual or face-to-face. It's the letters. It's the cards. It's the connection. And so, given what you value about hosting, and given your hopes and dreams for your guests, list as many of the possible hosting moves that we might make in order to get our guests there. And it's my hope that when you meet in your small groups, you can share this collective wisdom so that we can continue to revision how we support our guests throughout the year so that they feel the absolute love that we want them to feel. And so I'll leave you with that, just jotting that list of possible hosting moves. And I want to thank you for taking a few moments out of your busy schedule to go through this reflective activity with me. I look forward to seeing you again.
What's going on, everyone? Now, one of the things that I have done for the majority of my life is trying to understand how humans think, why we act the way we act, why we tick the way that we tick. And I want to take us through a little game so that we can actually see how this knowledge can play out in the real world. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to go ahead and pull up this screen, okay? Now, you should be able to see, hold on, there we go. You should be able to see my screen. Now, on the screen, in a moment, I'm gonna pull up a bunch of numbers that are jumbled all over the place. This is all I want you to do, okay? What I want you to do is try to go in sequential order from number 1 to the highest number you can get. Now, the highest number on this page, I'll give it to you, is 40, okay? So you want to try to go from 1, 2, 3, 4. So the key here is if you can, if you're near your screen, ideally, you'd want to be able to touch each number from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? If you're not near your screen, or you don't have access to touch it for any reason, you just want to eyeball it, but don't just scan all over it. I want you to actually go in sequential order. Okay, and if you can, in the chat, I want you to let me know what number you got. All right, so here we go. We're gonna go from 1 to as many numbers you can. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds on your mark. Again, we're gonna go 1 to 40, sequential order, not randomly, in the right order. Okay, 1, 2, 3. You have 30 seconds. Okay, try to get to number 40. Keep going. Pressure's on. Good. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop. Okay. So whatever number you got, I want you to just go ahead and put it in the chat if you can. If you can't put it in the chat for any reason, I just want you to hold on to the number that you got. Now, if you approach this the way most people approach this, the first time around, this feels like it's just kind of a jumble. It's just this random hard thing. How could I possibly get all of the numbers? Now, what I want you to realize is these numbers are actually not random at all. There's actually a pattern to these numbers. And I want to show you what that pattern is and then give you one more time to see if you can beat your score. So what I need you to do right now is in the chat, just go ahead and put whatever number you have. If you're not near the chat, I just want you to hold on to whatever number you have, because once I show you this pattern, this hodgepodge of numbers will no longer seem to be so confusing. Now, just out of curiosity, can anyone see the pattern? Can anyone see it? Because if you can see it, that's very impressive. But let me show it to you, okay? All of the numbers are actually in columns, okay? All of the numbers are actually, they're not centered in the columns, so it might look like they're random, but they're actually all in columns. In addition to them being in columns, they're using a 2-column jump in a square pattern. So 1 to 2 jumps 2 columns, right? 3 to 4 jumps 2 columns, 5 to 6, 7 to 8. And if you can get the first number, you can jump over to the second one pretty quickly, and it uses kind of a box or square to be able to make that, okay? So here's what I want you to do. Now that you can see this pattern, I want to give you one more shot at trying to beat your first score. So with the first go, you just kind of went at it and you just did the best you could, right? And you got to some number in 30 seconds. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds again. Knowing that you can see this pattern, I want you to see if you can beat your previous score. I'm gonna give you 30 seconds. Can you beat your previous score? On your mark, get set, go. 30 seconds. Keep going. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time. Okay. Were you able to beat your previous score? My assumption, if I had to make a guess, is that yeah, you were able to beat your previous score, right? Why? Well, it's fairly obvious, right? The reason why you're able to beat your previous score is simply because you understood the pattern. So something that looked really difficult and really confusing, once you understand the pattern, no longer has the same confusion. That makes perfect sense, right? Here's what I will argue today. There are patterns to how we as humans act. And if we can better understand those patterns, we can then better use them to live a more fulfilled life, to have a more loving life, to enjoy things better because it doesn't seem so random as others may perceive it. Now, here's what's fascinating about knowing the pattern. I want you to get this because I'm going to reveal to you one of the biggest patterns I have noticed in how humans interact with one another. And it's really fascinating. And I think once you see this, you'll see how this plays out. Okay? Now, one of the biggest patterns that I've observed is that if you, well, before I tell you what the pattern is, let me tell you this. Once you know the pattern, you're gonna hate me and you're gonna love me. Let me explain why. You're gonna hate me, you're gonna love me. The reason why you're gonna hate me is because when you see it, you're gonna see other people not seeing it. In the same way, if I showed that piece of paper to you and to someone who didn't go through this little exercise with us, you'll immediately know what's going on. But the other person won't. So you'll hate me because you're gonna see this pattern in others and they're not gonna see how it's playing out the same way you will. But here's the why you'll love me. When you notice this, what you're about to get in these next few minutes, I promise you, your ability to deal with joy, your ability to let go of difficult things, your ability to get more people on your side is going to increase, and your day-to-day experience will be incrementally better the more you adhere to what we're going to talk about. So, with no further ado, let me explain exactly what this idea actually is. I call it a bunker mentality, okay? A bunker mentality. Now, here's what I mean by a bunker mentality. A bunker mentality is when you're in, if you can imagine a war, a bunker is this big kind of protection in the middle of the war field, right? So imagine there's people over here and people over here, and they're fighting each other. In the middle of this is a bunker that this side will go into, and there could be bombs and guns and missiles and all these things firing, but when you're in the bunker, you're safe. Now, when you're in the bunker, you know the people next to you are your teammates, right? It's common sense. If you know this, the people next to you are your teammates. What that means is that these individuals are on your team. So everyone in the bunker is on your team. Everyone on the other side of the bunker, that's your enemy. Does that make sense? This is easy. We're getting to the idea. This isn't the idea yet. This is the premise of the idea, okay? And what I'll say is that, let me pull up my screen here for you. Boom. What I'll say about the bunker mentality is that it's not about what stands in front of you. It's about who stands beside you. At the depths of the most difficult times, at the depths of the most challenging times, it's often not what stands in front of you that matters. It's what and who stands beside you. So what I'm asking you to do is to get into the David's Refuge bunker. And what I mean by that is know that when you're in the bunker with David's Refuge, the people next to you, to your left and to your right, they're on your team. They're on your side. The people outside of that and the ideas outside of that, that might be a whole different story. But when you're in this bunker, these are your teams. Now, when you're at home and you're dealing with all of the challenges of life. Now, let's be clear. 2020 has not been a banner year, okay? 2020 has not been one of the easiest years. It's not been one of the most wild understatement, not one of the most loving years that we've had as a people. You take all of the difficulties that you are already dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and then you add pandemic on top of that. Then you add social unrest on that. Then you add racial unrest on top of that. Then you add election wildness on top of that and political unrest on top of that. And then you add like all these other things that make someone go, what in the heck is going on? Does anyone remember when we were in 2019 in December and we were like, 2020 is going to be my year. 2020 vision. It's going to be perfect. And then that boomerang hit back and we was like, oh, Lord, looking forward to that 2021. So look, in front of us is an incredible amount of difficulty. And I would argue for what's in front of you, throwing all of these elements, plus what you're dealing with day to day, that does not go away. It can be quite maddening, okay? And I get that. So it's not about what stands in front of you. It's about who stands beside you. And if you get into the visions bunker, and if you truly understand that when you're in this bunker, these people are by your side, not against you. These are the people that truly, truly care. Well, there's something that's really important. So let me explain what that is. What that is understanding what we need most. This is the pattern here. I want you to see this pattern. I want you to see how it plays out. There's two things that we need most as humans. Two things, okay? The first one is going to make perfect sense to you. The second one, not so much. And you may even argue with me and debate with me on the second one, but I want you to stay with me because the second one is what causes you to understand the pattern so much more deeply. Now, the first thing that we need is community. Now, you know this. You know the importance of community. That's why you're involved with David's Refuge. That's why you join social clubs. That's why you play sports and do hobbies and connect with other humans. We are social creatures. By definition, if we do not interact with others, we die. This is science. I want to be clear. This is science. And what I mean by science is if you take a little baby, okay, and you don't let that baby get touched and held and loved by another human, that baby will die. If you want to take a criminal and hurt them, we put them in what's called solitary confinement, because we know when we remove people from community, it is the easiest and greatest way to torture them. Now, sometimes we need to be removed from community. We don't got to be with them all the time. Sometimes we're like, I need a break from all of y'all. That's true. We get that. But I'm saying overall, we need community. We need people to share ideas with. We need people to share love with. It's the same reason why. And if you ever thought about this, this is kind of a weird thing. You ever notice that we go to movies with people? It's literally an event, an experience where you can't talk to anyone. It's not a social event. But for some reason, going to a movie with someone is more beautiful than going to that same movie by ourselves. It's not to say you can't go to a movie by yourself and enjoy one by yourself. It's not to say that. Of course you can. But if you look at it, most people, when they go to movies or they go to concerts, it's not a social event, but there's something about being there, which is different. And I think all of us kind of miss like the ability to go to live events. I mean, last year we were all together physically, which was a beautiful experience. So there's something about being in the energy. It's the same reason why you can watch a basketball game or a football game from the comfort of your own home for free. But if you want to be there in person, it costs so much more money. Why? Your couch is way more comfortable. Your house is way more comfortable than those hard seats in the stadiums with all those people and those like $25 hot dogs, $65 sodas. But that community feeling is unlike anything else. And that feeling and that experience is what we pay a premium for. So we know we need community. Now, what's the other thing that we need? Well, the other thing that we need, beyond a sense of community, is we need adversaries. We need adversaries. Now, in some fairy tale world, we've somewhere learned we shouldn't have enemies, and enemies are bad, and adversaries are bad. We don't need people to go against. Love, 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 come together. But if you look at the patterns of humans, we need adversaries. We need something to come up against. And if you actually want to know why we need adversaries, if you're actually interested in this idea of why do we need adversaries, it is because, and this is one of the patterns I want you to catch, we live in a world of restriction and release. Restriction and release. Think about it. This is a pattern I want you to see. The greatest joys typically come after the greatest restrictions. So if you've ever liked to watch sports in any shape, form, or fashion, sports is literally an entire thing built on restriction release. I'm offense. My opponent is defense. If you love football, isn't one of the greatest plays in football when the guy gets the ball and the other team all hits him, boom, and you think he's going to go down, restriction, he's getting restricted, but then he spins away from him and then keeps running and everyone starts screaming and then another tackle hits and he jumps over that restriction and breaks free into total freedom of release and in the end zone and everyone's going wild. The reason why that play is way more interesting than any other play in the game of football is because of so much restriction and then so much release. If you watch basketball, it's the same thing. You have a defender on you. If the guy does a nice little crossover, beats the crossover, defender falls down, jumps up for a dunk, the other defender jumps up to block it. Oh no, is he going to get blocked? Not get blocked, and he dunks it. Boom! Crowd goes on their feet. Because the amount of restriction and the amount of release experience is super high. And if you don't like sports, same thing happens with things like chess. You know, if you're playing a game like chess, it's, am I going to get checked or are you going to get checked? I'm about to lose the game. If you want to see people like go wild at a chess game, as wild as people go at a chess game, look at someone who looks like they put themselves in a corner. They get moved into check, and then they actually were setting the person up to take that piece from an unknown move and checkmate them. That's like, boom! Because it's this sense of restriction that gets met with this incredible release. And look, if you want to go really deep on it, which I'm not going to go into the details of this, okay? But if you look at intimacy and the benefit of it, a lot of it is restriction and release. I'll let you fill in the details there, okay? I'm not going to do it. But if you look at this pattern, our life is about this idea of restriction release. If you've ever bought a car before, if you remember your first car, saving all that money, that restriction of not being able to spend that money, but then being able to buy that first car. Does anyone remember their first car? Like the clunker that it probably was. You know, mine was a 96 Camry, had like 100,000 miles on it when I got it. I ended with 220,000 miles on the bad boy. You know, like that first car, you love it. Even though it's, your first car is probably not the most beautiful car. It's probably not your dream car, most likely your first car. But you know what it took to get that. And that restrictive feeling of not being able to drive and go somewhere where you want to. And then being able to now have the freedom, the release to drive where you want when you want is just one of the most beautiful feelings. And if you've yet to be in a position where you can buy your own car, just know what it feels like to be stranded somewhere and then your Uber shows up and you're like, oh, I can get out of here now. It's restriction release. So if you get this idea of restriction and release, you'll understand why adversaries are actually very, very important. This, my friend, is what I came here to share with you. Now that we understand this idea of a bunker, it's not about what stands in front of us, it's about who stands beside us. If we understand that we can get into the vision's bunker, okay, and we can understand that people in David's refuge, excuse me, I said visions, I said the vision of being in David's refuge bunker, okay? If we understand David's refuge, people, we're on our side, we're a team, and we know that we need adversaries. This, my friend, is the pattern to life. What destroys our bunker's safety? Okay? If we know we need community and we know we need adversaries because life is a thing of restriction and release. That's just a pattern of life. We need something to fight up against. We need something to come at arms with so that we can have something that is a challenge that we're overcoming. What destroys the safety of the bunker? If you look at your family as a bunker, why does family, who's supposed to be community, what destroys the safety of that family? When you look at friendships and you look at friendships that deteriorate, what destroys that friendship? When you look at romantic relationships that deteriorate, what destroys the safety of that marriage? It is this: when we confuse our teammates, our community members for adversaries. When we confuse our teammates, our community members for adversaries, this is what is the destructive force. That is a pattern that once you see it, you'll never interact with your fellow man, your fellow human, your fellow woman ever again the same way. I encourage you to realize that your family, whenever you're in the heat of an argument, to simply say something, we're on the same team. Don't say, I'm not the enemy, because that could kind of create actually negative thoughts, right? And I can't go into the detail of why that does. But like if you're arguing with someone, say, hey, don't get mad at me, I'm not the enemy. That actually makes them more mad at you. So don't say that. It's kind of the equivalent of telling someone to calm down when they're angry. Has that ever been effective for any of you? Have you ever told someone to calm down when they're mad and it's actually worked? Has it? The answer is no. So don't do it. So you actually say, hey, I'm on your team. Just by saying, hey, I'm on your team, we're in the same bunker. Let's talk about this. You can actually refocus that they are your community member and not an adversary. So it's super important that when you look at the people, get clear who's in your bunker, who's on your team. If you make sure you don't ever interact with them as an adversary, you win. But that begs the question, what's the biggest cause of this confusion? What causes someone who's in your bunker, who's in your community, to now become your adversary? I'm going to tell you what it is right now. This is the biggest cause of this confusion. And if you can understand this and see it and play it out, I promise you, your happiness, your joy, everything goes through the roof. The biggest cause of the confusion of teammates to adversaries is how we use language. That's it. how we use language. Now, let's say, for example, you have someone you love. They're a community member. They're on your team. They're in your bunker. But you get into a fight with them. If you use language to attack them instead of simply advancing your argument, when someone gets attacked, their only response is to attack back. So I'll say to you, for any of you with your family members, your spouses, your partners, your friends, if you get into an argument, which you will because you're human, advance your argument. Don't attack the person. Some simple ways you can understand if you are attacking the person versus advancing your argument. You use extreme language. You always do this. You never do this. Has anyone ever said that to you before? I can never count on you. You always are selfish. Are they always selfish? Always? Never been nice once? Extreme language is language that uses to attack the teammate to confuse them for an adversary. I never get the type of support that I need. You never get the type of support that you need? Never. There's no one here for me. No one. No one. Look, David's Refuge is here for you. You're loved. God loves you. This is important stuff. If you ever feel like you and someone from your team is just getting at each other, remember, they're in your community. They're not your adversary. There are some of you right now listening to me. You need to pick up the phone and call someone and tell them you love them. Someone you got into a fight with recently. Someone who maybe you love as a person, but politically you've not agreed with. So you've said, I'm cutting that person off. You need to call that person and tell them you love them. You care about them as a person. You care about them being in your community. You can advance arguments without attacking the person. There's people right now that maybe you were curt to or you were snippy at this morning that you need to tell them, hey, I know I said some things and I know you said some things, but what matters most is that we're on the same team. So let's focus on that and let's get to the resolution. When we understand this pattern, that we need community and we need adversaries. Adversaries won't go away. And by the way, if you want a good adversary, fight against ideas, not against people. It's the idea of fighting against racism, not the racist. It's against fighting against hate, not the hater. Because if we fight against the person, that person will always want to fight against us. But if we fight against the idea and not attack the person, we can find a way to love. In our world right now, if there's one thing I know, we need more love. We need more inspiration together. But that doesn't happen when we attack the person, because when we attack the person, they move from teammate to adversary. When we advance our argument by attacking ideas, we can agree upon ideas or we can disagree upon ideas, but we're not attacked as individuals. And then we can stay in the bunker together. And my prayer for you and my hope for you, with the work that I do all over the country, I see these patterns in people. Growing up on the projects, in the projects of welfare in Brooklyn, New York, and seeing so much, seeing friends being murdered and seeing, people go to jail and fights and seeing family members get into arguments where they never speak to each other ever again. I've witnessed it too many times to want to see it happen again. So my prayer for you and my hope is for you that you stay in the David's Refuge bunker, that you realize that the people here have your team, they have your back, and they're your community. And it's okay to be upset and it's okay to advance arguments, but not turn team members into adversaries. And we do that through language by saying things like extreme languages, never, always, can't. And when we realize we can talk about a situation and realize we can focus on being team members and being part of the community, we can fight against ideas that need to be fought against so that you can wake up every day and rise, so that you can get up every day and realize that you've been given what you've been given because your shoulders are strong enough to bear it. Anyone else would have been crippled and tied and dropped down and not been able to get up, but you can stand with this and rise again. You fall down 7, you get up 8 because you are not alone. And as long as you know that, my friend, as long as you stay strong and realize you're part of a community, you, my friends, will be able to rise up because you are part of something great. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me come back and connect with you. And Kate, you are an incredible soul, an incredible leader that makes this happen. Please continue to do the work you're doing so we can keep people in this beautiful David Refuge bond.
Hi hosts, I hope you found that time with Randy helpful in establishing your why for hosting with David's Refuge. I think it's really important that we spend the time thinking that through, especially this year, because it looks so different than it used to. The time I'm going to spend talking to you today is really about getting a framework of what this will look like in practice next year. I will follow this up with a document that gives all of the details of any changes that we have to the actual weekend respite program for next year. So this is really more of an overview of what you will see in that document to give you a sense of how to translate what you worked on with Randy into assessing what next year will look like for you guys individually. So when I think about my why, I think about loneliness. That's the reason why I think that our mission is so incredibly important. And the way that you combat loneliness is with connection. And so my hope for all of us this year as we engage with our families is that we are offering them connection throughout the year. And in the past, the way we've always connected with guests has been through the weekend respite program, which obviously we love and we will continue to do. But given the circumstances of COVID and the unknowns around that, I think that the truth is we're going to need to figure out how to make those connections throughout this year without being in person as much. And I know when you hear all year long, that can seem like a really heavy lift. And so today, what I wanted to really go through are three basic overarching ways that we're looking for all of our hosts to connect with guests throughout the year. The first will be in March and April. We will ask all of our hosts to send a short note on a pre-printed host bio card to all of your guests that just includes a welcome to the program and also your preferred method of communication. So a few weeks back, or months back, I guess, I asked you all to give me a revised host bio, really more of a welcome to the community, talking about why you serve and why it's important that you serve as a host for David's Refuge and what you hope for your guests to get out of their weekend. And so that would be something that if you have not sent me a revised bio / introduction to who you are, I would love to have that in the next few weeks so I can get those printed. The idea behind these being pre-printed is really that you won't have to write a full card to every single guest. It would really be just a quick introduction. And again, the reference to your preferred method of communication is so that if you love texting, you can give these guests your cell phone number if you'd like and say, hey, text me. That's the easiest way to contact me if you need anything. If you really are more of a note person, you can say, hey, here's my address. I'm going to write you, I'll be writing you, but feel free to write me back. Email is another thing if you don't feel comfortable putting your phone number on something. These are all great ways to offer connection to the guests. We'll ask each host couple or single parent host to take on 2 weekends, either virtually or in person this year. The wonderful news about our program this year is that Rory has really shifted a lot of the weekends around so that we have some larger groups at different properties so that it doesn't seem like as much of a heavy lift in terms of quantity of weekends. We'll still have each host mentoring an average of 12 families for the year. And so the actual weekend obligation will be the same as it was last year if you participated in that, where whether you are virtual or in person, there's the pre-call discussion of what to expect for the weekend. On the actual weekend, you'll engage in a different way depending upon whether you are virtually hosting or if you're in person. If you're in person, you'll be on site for 2 hours on Saturday morning without any overnights for the host. And then there's the standard follow-up of a card after the fact. And then we're asking that hosts connect with guests at least once more in 2021. Certainly, if you connect with guests in a way that feels organic and you want to be more in contact with them than once more, we would love that. It might be true that some guests you feel very connected to and others really don't seem to take you up on the offer of, a lot of correspondence, and that's fine too. But one more either call or text or email, card, and share about our events as much as you can. We have a lot of things going on, not even so much in-person events this year, but a lot of different resources that in your conversations you could share about, like our self-care initiative this year. We have some fun runs and things like that coming up. But what we've heard and what Rory shared with me when I was looking at this was the things that matter the most to guests based on the surveys that we've gotten for the past year are these unexpected calls or unexpected notes where they came at just the right time, where somebody was like, I didn't know I was even like that lonely until I found that somebody reached out to me, and it reminded me that I'm not by myself. And those are the things that I think can be really impactful this year for our guests while we are not as in person. So those are the pieces that we'd love the host to take on. What David's Refuge will provide to help this work out in a different, more streamlined way for hosts this year is upon your booking of the weekend, we are going to send all of your 2021 host details to you within 2 weeks of the booking. So you'll have your full list of guests for the whole year by March, basically. And so you can start planning out how you're going to communicate. It's something that I think will feel a lot more holistic in the way that like these relationships can develop, and it's really at your own pace. We will provide postage and cards for guest correspondence because I'm not sure everyone's going to write 3 notes. I didn't want to just assume and send postage and note cards, but the pre-printed host bio card, and then another note card for the follow-up after the weekend, plus the postage for those 2 things are something that we can provide. As you all know, you received a bag of goodies from us that had some note cards and some postage in it. There were also Christmas cards in there, and the idea for that was that those would be used in 2021. And so as you kind of move through those supplies, please let me know and I will get additional supplies to you. Or we'll figure out, sort of how that will work as we sort of go through the year. And then the last piece here is empower hosts to customize their guests' experience. So this is not going to look the same for every single host, and it shouldn't, because we all have different skills. We all have different ways that we connect with people and feel comfortable connecting with people. To be honest, I find notes challenging because I feel like there's never enough space for me to really communicate what I like to communicate. I love to text because it feels like a friendship. It feels like an organic way to go about connecting with people. And so I think that it's important that all of you know that there's not one that's better than another. There's nothing that we're expecting from you in terms of how you go about this. We just want you to do it and to try it and see what the result is at the end of the year. And we're really excited to see what happens at the end of this year because, we've never really done a year-round care experience for our guests. It's sort of been David's Refuge staff does these programs and the host does do the weekend. And I think that the truth is this team is so talented that the idea that we're only utilizing your skills on a weekend is just not enough. It's not using you to the best of your ability. And so I know that you all have a heart for offering connection to our guests, and I know that that's something that's so important to you. And I can't wait to see how this goes this year. And the truth is you're the connectors for David's Refuge to our families. And the way they connect to God and this community is really through you. And so I'm so excited to see how this shakes out this year. It can be really easy to minimize the impact that we're having. And I know the impact in person was so great, but I want you to think about a time in your life where maybe you got that note from somebody when you were feeling really down and how it made you feel like you're not by yourself. I know when my dad passed away, I got some beautiful cards from all of you, and it really it reminded me that there are people in this world who deeply care about what happens in my life. And so those are the things that you're going to offer to our families. And they appreciate it so much. And so I just want to ask you all to stick with us this year. I know that it's transitional, and I know it can feel like, well, maybe this is a time where I'll just sort of hold and see what happens. But we need you. We need this team to stick together and to show up for families this year, and just know that it's enough. And so if you haven't already, please click the link that was in this email to register for our debrief sessions. I can't wait. I know Kate's looking forward to it too, to go through your whys with you and to really talk about any of the concerns or any of the ideas that you have for how to make this year the most impactful that we can make it for our guests. So sign up for one of those sessions, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks so much.